Okay, we're now recording. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview Committee. My name's Councillor Paul Prentice. I'm chair of this committee. The Overview Committee undertakes pre-decision scrutiny of reports going to the Cabinet on the Council's policies, projects, budget and services. And I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you're seated in the public gallery, you are very welcome, and it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, it is recommended you make a member of staff aware who can direct you where to sit. We also have present at this meeting from the Cabinet, Councillor Alan Baldock, who's the leader of the Council, Pip Hazelton, who is the Cabinet Member for Climate Change, and Mel Dawkins, who is the Environment and Climate Change Cabinet Member. They are... Pip Hazelton. Yep, I did mention Pip Hazelton. Housing. What did I say? Pip Hazelton, Cabinet Member for Housing, is definitely here. They are here to observe the debate as part of our early engagement before decisions are taken. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at the Tower House car park. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. And this meeting is being minuted, recorded, and will be uploaded to the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates and the Riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. And we move to apologies for absence. Pippa?
We have apologies for absence from Councillors Flanagan, Liz Harvey, Heaver and Jeanette Stockley.
And do we have any substitutes this evening?
We do. We have Councillor Duke for Councillor Flanagan, Councillor Watkins for Councillor Jeanette Stockley, Councillor Campbell for Councillor Heaver and Councillor Jones for Councillor Liz Harvey.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest received in advance? And are there any, if there any councillors want to raise them now? Leo?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a director on the Canenco board.
Thank you. Okay. And just so everyone knows, in terms of public participation, there are 6 public speakers registered for this meeting, and we will come to them shortly. For members, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January. Can I take it they are agreed by general assent? Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Naomi Smith. So we move on to item 6, which is Wincheap Park and Ride, options to increase capacity to 900 spaces to meet demand from the A28 and A2. As I said, there are 6 public speakers, and I'm going to invite them in turn to address the committee. I'm going to be fairly strict on the 3-minute time limit because we've got 6 speakers and we've got quite a debate to get through. So hopefully everyone does appreciate that. I think first up is Paul Todd, if you'd like to come to the public speaker desk. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors, members of the public. My name is Paul Todd. I am the Chief Executive of Dallington Neighbourhood Resource Centre. I cannot believe I've come here again to voice my community's strong opposition to Canterbury City Council's proposal to relocate the car park from Wincheap to Dallington Recreation Ground. This move raises serious concerns not only for the practical implications for commuters, but also the long-term impact on our local community and environment. First and foremost, Dallington Rec is a cherished green space. It serves as a vital recreational area for residents of all ages. Families gather here for picnics, children freely play, and it provides a much-needed haven for relaxation away from the busy city centre. To pave over this valuable land for a car park would be short-sighted, robbing the community of its last remaining open space in an area where preservation of green areas is more important than ever. This proposal undermines our responsibility to future generations. Moreover, the current Wincheap Park and Ride is ideally situated for ease of access to the city, and relocating it to Thannington Rec increases congestion on local roads. Thannington's infrastructure simply isn't equipped to handle it. And this in its turn could lead to longer journey times, increased air pollution and frustration for both commuters and residents. We should be looking to improve public transport links, not to encourage more cars into a residential neighbourhood, or indeed onto the entirety of the River Valley and its precious and fragile ecosystems. Once again, there is a clear lack of meaningful consultation with the community. Many residents will feel their voices have not been heard, and that the council is prioritising short-term convenience over the well-being of Thannington's people. A truly democratic process would be to consider the wishes and concerns of those who live and work in the area, not just that financial bottom line. Additionally, if Canterbury City Council were to renege on its previous assurances that the car park would not be relocated to the Rec made in 2008 and again in 2025, it would undoubtedly erode public trust. Such a reversal would send a clear message that the commitments made to the community can be disregarded, fostering cynicism and disengagement amongst residents. The council must recognise that maintaining transparency and honouring promises is essential for upholding confidence in local government. Appendix 9 of the report speaks of the assessment on impact of the impact on equality in the proposals. Only it doesn't address them at all. Thannington residents feel with justification that the needs of the community are discounted and that there are families with young people, young children, senior citizens and economically and socially disadvantaged people with others in the parish, for example, those with long-term physical and mental health issues that have not been assessed nor been considered. It would seem from the emptiness of Appendix 9 that the needs of this community are secondary to the convenience of people who merely visit, for whom Canterbury is an attraction, not a home.
Start to wind up, please.
In conclusion, I urge this council to reconsider this proposal. Let us protect our green spaces. Let us preserve our community spirit and invest in solutions that benefit everyone. Remember, Thannington Rec belongs to the people and its value cannot be measured in parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Richard Norman is our next speaker.
This council has many excellent policies on the environment and protection of green spaces. Your corporate plan says that delivering on these is your #1 priority. So I'd like to ask you, councillors, if I may, are you seriously committed to that priority? Because if you are, I really do not believe that you would recommend putting a park and ride car park in the River Valley, either on Wincheap Watermeadows or on Thannington Rec. When something similar was proposed in 2019, the Environment Agency said, while we support the need for park and ride, this development is not located in the right place. Considering the sensitivity of the river, the council's expressed desire to promote biodiversity and green infrastructure in its district. So it's partly about biodiversity. It's also about flood risk. You'll have seen the hundreds of flood alerts across the country recently. Climate change is definitely producing wetter winters. And if you put a car park on the floodplain, you're increasing the risk of flooding downstream. It's also about water quality. If you put a car park on the meadow, then the runoff from surface water will increase the risk of contamination of river water. Most of all, I think it's about the landscape character of the River Valley. I'm a trustee of Hambrook Marshes, and people regularly say to us that they love the fact that with 10 minutes walk from Westgate Towers, it brings you into open countryside, but they won't be able to say that if the view across the river is a view of a car park on the opposite bank. I should add, by the way, that as trustees, we're totally unimpressed by the suggestion in the papers that putting it there would release additional funding for projects on Hambrook Marshes. That's not a help. So please, no car park in the River Valley. There are other options, as you see from your papers, and I would ask you, please, to give serious consideration to the Kanenko site. That does look like a viable alternative. Could I ask you also, please, to look critically at the numbers? You'll have seen that figure, by the way, that the average daily use is currently 390 vehicles, but of course that doesn't mean that they're all there at the same time. So please treat that target figure of 900 spaces as something that's conjectural rather than definitive. One other suggestion I'd like to put to you, if I may, if there is a concern that at peak times a car park, wherever it was, would be full to capacity, then traffic coming from the northwest along the A2 could be directed onto the enlarged South Canterbury Park and Ride, which is already embedded in the current local plan, and that might give some added flexibility. For example, it might mean that you don't have to push back the Kanenko site and cut down any trees. So there are alternative options. Please, no car park in the River Valley. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. Sian Petman, thank you.
My name is Sian Petman. I'm a river warden, a member of the Canterbury Riverside Group, which is convened by the Council, a trustee of Hambrook Marshes, and one of the coordinators of the former campaign to protect Wincheap Water Meadows. These meadows are functional floodplain in a designated green corridor, local wildlife site, and area of high landscape value. The Wincheap Water Meadows campaign concluded in October 2020, when the council revoked its planning permission for the construction of a car park on the meadows and gave assurances that no similar proposal would be resurrected again. We were therefore horrified to read tonight's report. The Great Stour is one of only 200 chalk rivers in the world. It is undoubtedly one of the most significant green infrastructure assets of the City of Canterbury. Not only is it of outstanding nature conservation value, it forms an important linking corridor for recreation and wildlife through the city and links with the countryside. Improving the river corridor for wildlife and access has been a long-term ambition for the Council. These are excellent words, and they are not my own. They are taken directly from the Council's Green Infrastructure Strategy, published in 2018. The Council has made many other strong commitments to protecting biodiversity and naturalising the river corridor. For example, the Council's Riverside Strategy says that Canterbury's riverside will be a joy to wander, a sustainable corridor for walkers and cyclists. It will be an attraction for visitors in its own right. Since when has a car park been a joy to wander or a visitor attraction in its own right? In 2023, the Council unanimously adopted a biodiversity emergency declaration, expressing a strong commitment to supporting nature's recovery. In line with this declaration, the Council is putting forward a 20% biodiversity net gain obligation in the draft local plan, something that will be unattainable for a car park on the water meadows. And just yesterday, the Council published its biodiversity strategy, an excellent document committing the Council to, and I quote, lead by way of example, and to embed biodiversity restoration and enhancement in all of its operations and decision-making, including on the land that it holds. Wincheap water meadows are a litmus test which will show whether the Council's biodiversity commitments carry real weight when difficult decisions need to be made. And in conclusion, the Council's proposals to construct a car park on the water meadows are totally incompatible with its biodiversity commitments.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And could I ask, Dave Smith is our next speaker. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dave Smith, Chairman of the Trustees at Thannington Neighbourhood Resource Centre. Canterbury's P&R sites are currently underutilised. The Council has issues funding with the existing P&R operation. How will the funding be achieved and maintained for any new P&R? A small point, with the proposed changes in local government, Canterbury City Council will not be funding any of this, and it will not be able to bind any new unitary authority to any funding. The current P&R site in Wincheap is currently used approximately 65% of its capacity. The increase for this financial year has been affected by the long-term roadworks in Canterbury. At least 200 spaces are always available at any time of the day. There needs to be a more deep analysis of both usage, projected increase and other options than given in this report. The main loss of spaces in the existing P&R is caused by the proposed fourth slip road design. If a different proposal had been adopted for this, approximately only 60 spaces would have been lost, leaving just an additional 380 spaces required for the proposed number required. Some options have not been considered in this report. Example, a P&R site was proposed on the Saxon Field site. Really, the only viable option is the option C, the Canico site. No suitable comparable alternative green spaces available in Thannington should the REC be used. For a P&R, the proposed Merton Park Sports Hub is not an alternative. It's 1.5 miles away and totally different in use and concept. The REC is an immense asset and very valuable contribution to the community. It is fundamental also to the commercial viability of Thannington Resource Centre. Read the planning compliance issues with the Thannington REC proposal. Very simply, it does not comply with the Council's district open space strategy. It would not pass the MPPF soundness tests. It does not comply with the MPPF open space and recreation requirements. It does not comply with the MPPF promoting healthy space communities. Finally, it would not be defined as sustainable for the existing residents or future residents as the definition is defined for planning. I urge you to consider the implication of its loss and choose not to remove it for a very doubtful benefit. Thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Barney Parsons is next. Barney Parsons is next. Yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Barney Parsons, representing the Wincheap Society. Now, I just need to change my glasses. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to read to you. Now, Wincheap and Thannington and city residents have already, over the past years, made their feelings very, very clear about most of tonight's proposals. Destroying large areas of precious and important riverside green space in Wincheap and Thannington is just not acceptable to local people. They are prepared, if necessary, to redefend these green spaces using community activism and legal action, which can be highly potent, as it was before. I'm sure you'll hear lots about this tonight. Now, the Council is now in a dilemma, and wise heads are needed to resolve it. I would like to ask a few questions and put forward some suggestions which might help find a resolution. Firstly, what is the latest news on approval by National Highways of the current off-slip design? What is happening with the mitigation of safety concerns for pedestrians, cyclists, and so on? Also, is this unwieldy and twirling design, which I'm sure you've all seen, really the last word? I'm not sure that it is. Now, Canterbury City Council could spend the developer's money earmarked for the irrational and nonsensical Wincheap gyratory system, which I've spoken about before, to contribute to an improved slip concept. Start further back along the A2, leaving more space available at the current park and ride site. Another way to increase park and ride space may be to expand the Dover Road park and ride to cope with peak demand and overflow, sending traffic along the A2 if Wincheap is full. Not difficult these days with electronic signage. A further possibility might be an overflow park and ride near a new slip road off the A2 in or even near Merton Park. We need, as a council and a city, to get expert transport planners to help our city's councillors get out of this dilemma and not build where we should not. Wincheap needs a proper integrated traffic management plan based on good data, trustworthy analysis, and realistic modelling to cope with ongoing and future housing and traffic developments. As far as I can see, we don't seem to have that at the moment. Not wrestling with piecemeal projects with unforeseen circumstances. It is the job of councillors and officials to think outside the box junction and not accept the inevitability of blinkered, destructive and mediocre decisions. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pat Edwards.
Good evening, Chair, members of Overview and local residents. I have been on Planning Committee since 2019 and as the Chair since 2023. As a council, I personally think we should keep in mind the importance of our commitments, not to build on Wincheap Water Meadows, as we have revoked the planning permission previously given, and secondly, as we've said, we'll find an alternative plans to using Thannington Recreation Ground. When the Wincheap Water Meadows site was at planning, it was contentious because of the need to maintain the floodplain. I've sent a couple of photos around to Overview, and you would have seen the one I took on last Sunday. Complete flooding right behind the B&M site, and the need to protect the chalk stream from pollution as well. The then Cabinet Member for Open Spaces was soon persuaded his vote in favour was ill-placed, and it only went through by one vote. So we have passed several large developments extending housing in Thannington and towards Chartham, and have more sites extending it further out in the new local plan. These do not have sizable new recreational space, largely because Thannington Rec exists. So we need to recognise the large estates that rely on this open space provision, and will do in future. Both areas need protecting. The new Option C provides an alternative which meets our previous commitments and provides the least worst plan to provide park and ride spaces, which we do need in the draft local plan. However, I still think it shows some costs that are ones we will be spending anyway, and in common with other options, the report doesn't cover the environmental impact. So a couple of comments. My understanding of the Canenco plans is that we're going to move the operation out of Wincheap anyway, and are currently looking for somewhere else, as this site is not suitable, as we want to develop residential use in Wincheap. So add these relocation costs to the cost of P&R, I feel is somewhat disingenuous, and therefore they should be separated out. However, it will require some biodiversity net gain and mitigation of environmental impact, firstly to ensure runoff does not impact the chalk stream. We've already heard information about that. And this is the main biodiversity area running through the city, which makes Canterbury what it is. And so most importantly, it's also its floodplain. Secondly, to mitigate the light pollution for the environment, which is full of birds, animals and insects in this particular area. So there will be costs. Perhaps the most important additional factor here is that the report suggests the extension of the site is infill. whereas the Google map clearly indicates, and again I sent this round, clearly indicate that the line at the back of the Wincheap Industrial Estate is straight along the Kanenko boundary, but the gym, pets store, B&M stores are built further out towards the river. I just want to make a point. The exceptional case for P&R should not become a precedent for further incursion into this important river floodplain and local wildlife site. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. So, thank you to all of our public speakers for making the effort to come out and air your views tonight. So we'll be considering the report of Bill Hicks, Director of Place, Nikki Mills, Director of Finance and Procurement, and Richard Moore, Head of Transport and Environment. Before I will actually ask Richard to make his introduction first, and then I'll ask Bill to read a statement. So over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, a brief introduction. I think you've all had time to read the report. The reason, the reason we're here is obviously the A2 off slip will cut through the existing park and ride site. It will reduce the capacity nearly by half. The alignment has been agreed in principle by National Highways. It is subject to obviously their detailed technical audit. That process is held up at the moment due to a planning judicial review. But we expect the A2 off slip to be under construction by about 2029, so about 2.5 years' time. The A2 off slip will open up the demand for park and ride from the A2 northwestern corridor. That's been it's the busiest route into Canterbury, and it's been an objective of this council for probably about 20 years to find a site that meets that that corridor. Previous studies have looked at sites in the Harbour Down area to create a fourth site to meet that demand. But the councils over the years have decided that as Wincheap is an existing site and when the A2 off slip goes in, the demand for both those corridors should be met ideally at one site. So that started a long and pretty hard site selection process that back in 2017, as some of the speakers have said, led to the council decision that the site around the Meadows area connecting to the existing park and ride should be the chosen site. That did get safeguarded in the local plan, and that did get planning consent, which was subsequently revoked. Following that, that decision, officers looked at alternative sites. At one point in time, the developer who is promoting the Merton site did indicate that they could create an off-slip into their site that could also meet that need. But about a year ago, they had detailed comments back from National Highways to say that another off-slip into their site would not be acceptable. So that option was off the table. So that left officers looking around for alternative sites once again. Thannington Rec was one that went out in the Regulation 18 consultation for the local plan as a potential site. But we were all aware that it had obviously problems with replacement of public open space and sports provision. So the report sets out 6 feasible options in transport terms, and I'm not going to go into obviously the environmental impacts on some are much greater than others and the cost on some are much greater than the others, but in transport terms, from my perspective, they would all work. We're not asking for councillors to make a decision on which one they like. We as officers are not making recommendations. But I'm absolutely, all of us here today are here to answer your questions on any of those options tonight. I think I'll leave it there. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from me in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So I will now ask Bill Hicks, Director of Place, to read a short statement that's been prepared by our monitoring officer before we begin the debate proper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I've been asked to read the statement, as has just been said, on behalf of the monitoring officer. It begins, members, before we begin the discussion on possible park and ride locations, I would like to give a short reminder about the need to avoid any appearance of predisposition or predetermination. Predisposition means that you may have provisional views, but you remain open-minded and willing to consider all the evidence and arguments before reaching a final decision. However, you need to avoid the impression of being biased by your comments, which observers consider tips into being predetermined. Predetermination means having a closed mind. If a member appears to have already decided the outcome, they must not take part in the debate or vote. Throughout this process, including tonight's meeting, members are expected to be in listening mode, hearing all arguments for and against, and giving full consideration to the points raised by the residents, public speakers, and colleagues. To help avoid the impression of a fixed view, members are encouraged to frame comments as issues raised by residents. For example, residents have raised concerns about, a number of people in my ward have expressed, I remain open-minded and willing to hear all views. This distinction is important because it shows that members are reflecting community feedback rather than expressing a settled personal position. A reminder that any appearance of predetermination can expose the council to legal challenge, delay the local plan, and reduce the council's control over the development. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Can I just ask Bill a question? Because we're not voting tonight.
We're not voting on a specific option.
So-
We're inviting all feedback.
Yeah.
And so,
I just wanted to be clear
Yeah.
about that because it did sound like we were voting.
yeah, I mean, I think I should probably just caveat by saying we're not expecting to have a vote, though if the committee did express that view that it wanted to have a vote, then I'm sure we could consider it. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit confused and a bit nervous about what I want to say because I've listened to the residents. What I say may look predetermined for the local plan. I'm not sure if it is or isn't until I make my comment. So I don't really know if I can say what I want to say, and I feel like my hands are being tied or I'm sitting on my hands because I'm kind of not nervous what I'm going to say because I will say it. But if that determines that I can't vote on the local plan, then I've been unduly treated as a member of as an elected member of the council.
I understand the point you're making. I'll ask Peter to come in on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is where it starts to get challenging, particularly where we're in the run-up to local plan. The important thing tonight is, and I'll use layman's terms to make it a bit easier, if any of you say, over my dead body, will I vote for a local plan if you go for option X, that's not going to land very well when we get to the next stage. If you're saying, my opinion, based on what's presented in front of me tonight, is I prefer X over Y, that's absolutely fine. That may be more predisposition, that you're predisposed to one thing over another. Your mind may change when you see the local plan in its entirety. But anything which on record tonight in particular sets out that you've made your mind up on any one of the options without seeing it in the round or with full sets of evidence is the sort of thing that could get us into trickier waters. If you're worried about anything you're going to say, feel free to say what you're thinking, and then we can try and give you some guidance as to how that may be perceived on public record.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
How do I get that advice before I speak?
We
Got my speech
if you've
before?
got a concern, then just say I've got a concern about something I wish to raise, and we will make sure that
Well,
point
my concern could be, and my suggestion would be, to not have a Wincheap Park and Ride and move everyone to Dover Road Park and Ride. Is that predetermined, or is that okay? That's fine. I'll go ahead then. Thank you, Chair.
Peter.
So, Chair, just for clarity, just for Councillor Thomas's benefit, yes, that is fine. If you go in, here's a different alternative that could be explored by officers, look at something else, then that's absolutely fine. You've not shut yourself off to one thing. You're saying, can you give us additional options?
Councillor Dupe had your hand up.
This is my first overview, so thanks for having me. I was under the impression that Overview debated things and then gave recommendations to cabinets. Is that still the case?
I'll go back to what I said because
I was listening.
I know you were listening.
Honest.
I think I'll make it uber clear because I appreciate if you've not been on overview before, it might not be as clear. And every item is treated differently. So on this particular item, we're not being asked to make a recommendation, but we're being asked to debate all of the options. However, like I said, I'll just make this point again. If the committee feels very strongly one way about a particular option, then we can look at that. So it would obviously need someone to propose and second and all the rest of it. But
Is this one different just because it's to do with the local plan?
I mean, this is pre-decision scrutiny. So we are not making a decision as overview committee because we are providing comments to the cabinet. And also worth saying, this is not a planning application either, because that's dealt with totally separately. So this is looking at a number of options, providing feedback, presented in the way that's sort of been suggested by officers. Okay. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if people get bored of my voice tonight on some of this. Yes, your overview looking at a single thing, which will be part and parcel of the full local plan when it comes through, of which that's a full council decision. So you'll be taking a decision on the local plan at that point as full council and the vote on that. So anything that comes across in any meeting, in anything you do in any of your life where somebody can quote you on what you've said to them privately, publicly or otherwise, can be used as a way of saying that you've been predetermined. So tonight, if you set out an extremely strong view on your strong preference, or not even strong preferences, your strong opinion on not wanting to vote for something because of X, Y, or Z grounds, and that sounds like if you're unwilling to change, and that option went into the final local plan, that could be viewed as predetermination, and therefore your ability to look on the full local plan, its entirety, in an unbiased way, could be challenged at a future point by somebody at a later point during the local plan process. So this is trying to protect all councillors at this point on a very small part of the local plan, but could be seen by others as predetermination on your views of the entirety of the local plan when we get to council in mid-March.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with us. They are technical points, but they are quite important. So, as I say, we're making views and comments, this committee, on this item, and they'll be used by the cabinet when making their decision. So, I would also, really important point at this stage, there is a confidential appendix, as members will be aware, as part of this paper. And if you wish to discuss that confidential appendix separately, then we'll have to go into closed session, but we can do that after the second item, because obviously that's not a session we can have public attendance at. But I'm sure you'll let me know if that's something you wish to do. So I'll open the debate, and I don't need to take a proposal or seconder, do I? Because we're just getting general comments. So open to you. Councillor Campbell, I see first. Welcome to Overview.
Yep, my first overview, probably my last. Thank you. As the councillor for Wincheap, no doubt you're going to hear from me a bit later about my preferences and or lack of preferences. But can I just kick off by asking Richard for some clarity on some of the items in the report, please? You mentioned earlier about the Fourth Slip Road. I think you said the construction will start in 2029. Is that's based on a design approval that's imminent or hasn't happened? Or if perhaps when I've finished the question, if you could perhaps give some clarity over those timescales, and ditto for the Wincheap gyratory as well, please. My second question is something that came up by one of the members of the public, and it was about detailed transport modelling. And I don't mean this in any way insulting to the officers, but it does feel like the numbers within the report are plucked out of a number of sources and not from a comprehensive, detailed transport modelling that shows origins and destinations, areas of redundancy and resilience. It looks like it's been put together and we've come up with a number 900. And on the face of it, it could be 800, it could be 1,000. And I don't think we've got enough data there to say that's a really robust figure. So we may be overbuilding this site, and I'd really like to get some idea about what would be required to get some more robustness around those numbers. And the third point I was going to raise was really about how did we get the £10 million for the Park and Ride car park so wrong? I mean, one thing that Canterbury City has done in recent years is build a car park. About 10 years ago, we were in the same status for the Canterbury West Station car park. The outturn cost of that was, I think, somewhere in the region of about £10–11 million, but less than half of the size of the one that we're proposing in Wincheap. And yet it came out at the same price. I mean, any reasonable estimate using a cigarette packet would have come out around about 20 million, 25 million. So how did we get that so wrong? What lessons have we learned from that? Because it feels like a number was deliberately arrived at that made it go away during the consultation period. I know that may be a cynical view, but you can see the fact that a 10 million that's turned into 24 million is not an acceptable situation. So I'll leave those questions just for now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer them as I go through it. So taking the last one first, the 10 million in the budget was not the cost of the multi-storey. It was the estimate for the multi-storey has always been around about, in fact, my estimate was 17 to 22 million. We've had cost consultants now brought it into 25 million. The difference was always going to be, and Nikki Mills might be able to explain it more, through asset disposals, which would cover that gap. But the estimate was not wrong. The 900 estimate on demand is based on origin and destination data back in the current local plan. So that does go back to probably 2016 now, 2016 data. And obviously that's demand from an existing corridor, which we've got accurate data on, and a new corridor, which we haven't got accurate data on. So there's always a bit of forecasting involved, looking at suppressed demand. And the most scientific you can get is by doing origin surveys from people who are currently using city centre car parks. And that was done. And we know from that about 28% of all the people who use city centre car parks could use that A2 Park and Ride when it was built. So we've got actual data from Wincheap. We know that's gone down a little bit since COVID, but it's on the up again. And we've got this suppressed demand figure that came up with around about the 900 figure that was challenged all through the last local plan examination, and actually was agreed by the inspector. So that's a pretty robust figure, 900 for the two corridors. That's not going to happen on day one. There will be time for people who are currently parking in the city centre to change their habits, and that habit change will come through the City Council using their parking charges to influence where people park, to carry on disposing of city centre spaces, so you actually physically displace people to use Park and Ride. Park and Ride is an essential part of the current transport strategy, and going forward, it's the only way that we can make, as well as it's a bus-led strategy, yes, first and foremost, but for those people who can't use the bus, Park and Ride is the next best sustainable mode of transport. So they drive to the outskirts of the city and use a bus for the last bit of their journey through the most congested areas. So it is a key part of the strategy. I'm confident in the 900 figure eventually. I don't know what the figure is going to be on day one. My report says I've estimated 750. I think that's a realistic figure. We know Park and Ride use at Wincheap has grown by 8% for the last 2 years. I've no reason to think that won't continue to grow. It's about 80% of pre-COVID level now. So in a couple of years' time, it will be back to where we were prior to the pandemic. The date of Jan 29 for the off-slip is actually the indicative timeline that the housing developer is working to. So about David Wilson Homes, they are the ones who will be paying for this off-slip design. They've still got to go through this technical approval process, detailed technical approval process, but National Highways have given their approval, in principle, approval to the design that had planning consent. Yes, there are a number of hurdles still to go through, and there's obviously a JR outstanding as well. But that's the earliest date that I think they will start construction. The gyratory I don't know about. This is another one that's totally in the hands of Kent County Council as part of a 278 agreement with the developer, and I'm not privy to that start date.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Watkins next on my list.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Great to be here. Always very happy to debate anything to do with Park and Ride. So hope to come back at future times. I've got two questions and then a suggestion. People hearing for Cabinet. I suppose the first point is, yeah, I was a little surprised to say the least to see a multi-storey car park proposed for the Wincheap site, because obviously previously in the administration, we know how hard it is to get this local plan right. And National Highways had said the road's curvature wasn't going to work for the off-slip from the A2 into the Park and Ride. So now you're saying that National Highways are saying, a few years later, that is okay. So have you put in new plans? Is the curvature changing? What's changed that means National Highway did oppose this before, but now support this and thus make that option possible? Secondly, just on the economics of it, if you were going to spend £25 million on CapEx, a vast amount of public money, am I interpreting the paper correctly to think that would mean the interest cost in 28-29 would be £1.9 million a year, or was the 1.9 million actually the cost figure after the additional Park and Ride revenue? Because obviously there's costs to build it, but there should be some income as well. So I just want that clarified, because that's a key part of the paper as well. How much is essentially the taxpayer going to pick up for putting this on our balance sheet? And then finally, just an alternative here. The paper says none of these options are very attractive. We've heard people speak about the environmental concerns with both Thannington Rec and next to the Wincheap Meadows there. Potentially very damaging. So everyone will share that concern. I think you could take that as read. If there was an alternative, wouldn't it be wonderful? Have we looked at the we've been, for 3 years the administration's been sort of promising us a bus first strategy. We've only seen bits and pieces of that, and you've only actually got 1 more year left of this administration. So I presume at some stage a kind of holistic bus strategy will come through. I hope it does. Have we looked actually as part of that, taking the £25 million or some of it and just doing this differently? And what I would suggest really does need a proper look at as just a new option, what would that be, 7? That rather than use Park and Ride, which is a little bit clunky because people drive a bit of the way and then they have to wait for a bus and then bus the rest, have we looked at actually improving the bus network such that people get a bus from their house, on these new estates around the edge of Canterbury, like the fast track scheme in Dartford and Gravesham, which has been massively successful at high levels of bus usage, using public money to build the infrastructure, the dedicated bus lanes, but also just the nature of the buses and the services
Can you
themselves.
wrap up your question?
To work really well, because I do wonder if we could just leave Wincheap as it is and take the surplus demand, which does need to be catered for, with buses essentially from the home, from the new estates, to get people where they want to go easily in one bus without this sort of mixed mode approach. So I'd love for Cabinet to look at that as an alternative. £25 million, a lot of money.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins.
So yes, the bus first strategy will start in the first 5 years of the new local plan. So we've got to go through the whole Regulation 19, the whole log plan examination, and when that gets adopted, then we can start rolling out. We've got some SIL money that we are banking on using for transport initiatives and bus initiatives in particular. All new big developments will have to have sustainable transport at their heart anyway, so they will have to have dedicated bus services. Park and Ride, its purpose is to fill that gap for people who don't live in big developments. So we've got a very dispersed rural population in some areas. You're never going to get a bus service from those villages, no matter what happens. That's where Park and Ride comes in. Yes, 25 million was a lot of money. Is a lot of money for a multi-story, if that's the decision. And Nikki might comment on those fundings. But bus services themselves, a new bus service is hugely costly per annum. So there's no easy answers to it. But I'm committed to Park and Ride. It's been the mainstay of the council's transport policy for 20, 30 years, and it's despite its downturn post-COVID, it is a significantly. It's one of the best in the country. It's one of the cheapest in the country. And if we don't have that as a main part of our next transport strategy, we will have to rethink that. We've got to get through an examination. Park and Ride is one of the main things that an inspector will be looking at to say, have you got a credible transport solution strategy? And Park and Ride is a key part of that. So we can't give it up. It's necessary. Or we go back to the drawing board and we look at some of the other options. I would say the circulation plan, that didn't have Park and Ride at its heart. That wasn't very popular.
Thank you. Councillor, what were they finance type questions? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a new a revised design that's been put in and approved in principle.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you read correctly. In the report, it does say 1.9 million of borrowing costs. And that would taper off as the disposals would come in to finance it. But it's a timing issue that there would be the costs coming in before the disposals were happening, so the cash flow. And so that would be 1.9 million, as it says in the report. But also, just to reiterate, there is extra Park and Ride income. However, with a multi-storey, there's also extra costs and maintenance and cleaning and utilities and all of those sort of side of it that we've looked at that, and it roughly offsets each other. So it's not an income generator for that side of it. But also, just to reiterate, we haven't got 25 million to then spend on something else, whatever the options are. This is, as it says in the report, it's unfunded at the moment and would need to be, solutions would need to be found to fund it, some of it. So yeah, just to clarify that there's not can't go spending it on other things.
Thanks, Nikki. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions as well. One of my first things was, if I can ask just a quick question of Richard, how you said it's going to reduce in half. I couldn't find in the report how many parking spaces we're going to be left with once the A2 slip has been built. I just want a quick answer on that, and then I'll come back on other things.
590 at the moment. The A2 off slip reduces it to 350. We've shown one of the drawings in front of you shows extending a little bit into the allotments, and that gains about another 40 spaces. So it goes down from 590 to 390 on the options that you in front of you.
Because it wasn't clear in the report. I mean, the report is quite clear that, a do nothing option is not recommended. I mean, I think I've sat and looked at this and thought there's nothing good that, they're all got a detriment. I worry about the cost because I'm a ward councillor in Whitstable, and if we're spending huge amounts of money that will come from the whole district, we're going to lose things in the rest of the district. So the multi-storey for me would be, you know, I think it's quite difficult because of the costs around that. The one at Thannington Rec, I had a good look on Sunday, and I can see, yeah, that makes sense, but it doesn't because the road junctions just don't. I mean, I hear what people are saying about the impact, but the road junctions are terrible on that side of the A2, and it's a residential area with already has traffic sitting there. I just think we would create more of a problem. I mean, in Lewisham, we had kids die who, you know, who lived next to roads, and the housing's too near. It all feels a bit, you know, and I hear what a couple of the speakers said as well, you know, about this. It is really difficult because of the more the finances, it means it's going to be cuts elsewhere in the district, I'm assuming. I mean, somebody clarify if that would be the case.
Nikki, would you like to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we will need to look at options for making savings and income, as well as capital disposals that we would need to look at, and that would be part of what Cabinet's decision making of how things would be funded.
Thank you. Councillor Buttman's next.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to start with a couple of resident comments that I've received quite directly, and quite a number of them. The first is about signage on the A2 coming north from Dover. So that presently there's no sign on the A2 directing people to the Old Dover Road Park and Ride. It's just a P with a picture of a coach. Whereas further up the road, it actually states Wincheap Park and Ride. So maybe people aren't quite as aware of that. So that's that one comment. There's quite a number of residents also got back to me about listening mode, and the council being in listening mode, asking what the point of the consultations are, and do you only listen to certain groups of people? They mentioned that the council sort of listened quite a lot to the town council proposers, but yet on this time with the Thannington Park and Ride, they seem quite dogged into keeping it in Thannington and not looking at other suggestions, such as Saxon Fields and Milton Bridge. I'd also like to know, I know you Richard, you mentioned about the new A2 slip road, increasing cars coming into Canterbury, but I would argue that it would still be the same number of cars visiting, but they're just being redirected. It would still be cars coming into Canterbury for the same reasons they may go elsewhere. So, I mean, you read on social media, they may go to Westwood Cross or Bluewater rather than come into Canterbury. So moving it further out of town, they're happy to go further for cheaper parking. And then it just gets onto I'll come to a couple of questions before I come back later. I was wondering why Old Park was mentioned in part of the proposals. It seemed it was as if it was a bit of a carrot as some of the options. And then secondly, whatever worst option we put forward, what plans will you put in place immediately to protect the future of everything that isn't accepted? So if we go for option one, how do we make sure option B, the land in option B, is protected going forward so we don't come back here again? Thank you.
Richard?
I think I can I'll answer the last one first. They're looking at local government reorganisation and handing over city council assets to a unitary authority. Officers are going through a process now, looking at all our green spaces in the district and working out suitable ways to protect them. So village green or fields in trust, those sorts of protections I know have been spoken about in my team and the portfolio holder for the environment as well. So that's an option for the council if they wanted to do long-term protection for green spaces and open spaces. I don't think there are any other questions from what were the other committee? Yes, please. Yeah, the part one.
Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As part of the process, officers have been through trying to find options, within the draft capital budget as it was and still is until a couple of weeks' time. We'd put forward a provisional £10 million towards future options for park and ride provision. And we'd intimated that we were going to use some money to explore the multi-storey option as part of that. Whilst we'd prefer not to spend all for 10 million in the budget, and I'm sure there's other things people would be interested to look at, we looked at some of those options that were coming in at less than 10 million and where they had perceived or actual negative impacts on the local environment, how we could use some of that money to do some of the off-site mitigation in similar ways as you would do with, you might see some housing development done with net gain in other parts of the local or general area in there. And we know that councillors have been keen to explore options around how we can improve access and biodiversity in Old Park. We know that there's been previous work considered on Hanbrook Marshes, and we know through obviously the debate that's happened on Fannington Rec that there's been lots of options and opportunities put forward by local residents and others on how that could be improved. So as part of trying to look at some of the areas that could be used in options A and B in particular, it was seen that as they come in under the 10 million, we would look at how we could use some of that money to provide other open space opportunities and access in other parts of the Canterbury area.
Thank you. Councillor Jupe is next.
Obviously, I wrote a speech, which I now cannot use, having looked at it. However, I'm not going to let it go to waste, because Flanagan is in the other side of the world, and I jumped at the chance to have my first ever overview committee, even though I'm not going to get to give my lovely speech. So I can say some things, and direct quotes from people complaining that the council are not joined up in their thinking and don't know their arse from their elbow, because we give options that directly contravene policies in previous local plans and this local plan, as well as spending a lot of time and effort in wonderful biodiversity working groups and submitting plans, as Sian mentioned earlier. So these had previously been given protections, but why are they now been put back in? And if that were to go ahead, say, for example, everyone's favourite option was option B and not the logical conclusion of C, if that were to go in, how would that be justifiable? I don't really know who's going to answer that. I just wanted to...
I think I'll ask Peter to answer that one.
I wish I was on holiday the other side of the world.
Well, apparently he's at work, so...
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
you know, I'll take it as work as well. I think on the... Yes, you're right. Policies get very tricky when you're looking at one against another. The main thing with options A and B is they are using existing policy. So that site, that red line plan that you see for option A and B is the existing policy within the current adopted local plan. So the space within there is, if you want to do it as a black and white, you know, sort of straight-laced, that's the area we can build a park and ride on. In any set way you want to do it, you can build it up, you can build it out, you can build all however you want to do it. If it fits within that red line, that's adopted policy, which would be relatively simple. And as we know, we've had planning permission there before. So you could probably assume you would probably be able to look at getting planning permission within that area as well, because it's adopted local plan policy. So it sort of is one of the areas that obviously as officers we can put forward and we should put forward as an option, because that's the policy of the council currently. How you use that space is obviously open to debate. The other ones are options that could be brought forward within the local area, which would need new policy So it would be erasing existing policy through the new local plan process and putting in a new policy to replace it, which is sort of what, as well as it landed last time, the Fannington Rec option was. That would have removed the current policy, it's N3, and it would have put in the C2, C0, whichever one it was, as that one. So one would replace the other. How it fits with other policies would be around how you mitigate the impact of potential development on and using those policies to try and get additional benefit or net benefit elsewhere or within the area impacted.
Just a couple of other points, because I'm always succinct. So the current draft local plan has a fantastic map, and it's got it outlined in green under policies DS20, various. I did all the research, it's gone to waste now. And they're saying that it's a designated local wildlife site as well. Does that offer no protection against its potential inclusion?
Local wildlife site is not a statutory designation, it's a planning designation, so it does offer some protection, but it's not one of the really strong ones. That you have to show that there's an overriding need to develop on a local wildlife site, and you have to mitigate and then show that any, if it's on a riverside that this one is, you'd have to comply with all riverside regulations as well. So it does offer some protection, but it's not. I was mentioned Village Green and Fields in Trust. They offer much stronger protection from development.
So just to come back on that, so the Water Meadows, sorry Paul, sorry Chair, they were protected previously after a massive campaign, and it was thrown out, and then it's also designated local wildlife site. It's all protected by various new policies in plans, but it's still being put forward as an option that we could consider.
The local wildlife site was a protection there before the local plan, and was obviously when we get through the planning process, that those issues all got raised through the planning process as well. So it has I say, the protection is there, but it's not one that's not, it can be overcome through appropriate mitigation.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Brady next on the list, I see.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hearing loud and clear that we've got a set of options, and Cabinet need to choose one of those options, because if we don't, then there's a high probability of KCC as the Transport Authority and the Inspectorate not agreeing on the local plan that has a bus first strategy and a transport strategy, which a lot of people support. I'd like to thank the speakers today with really compelling arguments. The speakers who spoke against option A and B, they were incredibly compelling about the protections of wildlife. The speakers who spoke against options D and E, and also when we've visited this previously, the community has spoken against those, and we hear them loud and clear. And it does sound like the funding for a multi-storey, 25 million, will be reducing funding for other services throughout the council. So it does look and sound, and I am hearing from residents, that option C does seem like the best, worst option. So I'm going to have a couple of questions on option C, if I may. I understand the Park and Ride bus passes through Kanenko site anyway. It was mentioned that there may be additional charges from the provider, but would they be substantial, seeing the bus passes straight past there? That's one. Within the documentation, it says that there's a relocation fee, and others have spoke very well that in 28 there's possibly going to be relocated anyway, due to the strategy of having a residential area on brownfield sites, which is in the local plan. If it's relocated to lands that Canterbury City Council already own, so a suggestion is Vauxhall Road where we own an area of land with industrial estate there, which is right near the HMRC, so Household Waste Recycling Centre, right near the Shelford landfill site. So it'll be a little bit quite ideal to have Kinenco, which is our waste collection site there. Would that reduce those costs? Have that been thought about? And I'm just going to end with, I'm sure when the Cabinet does look at these conversations and hears all those compelling arguments and put them together, I'm sure they might look at option C as an option that has the least negative things going for it, and the voices that we have heard within this hall today.
Is that for Nikki, or who would like to respond on that one?
Good questions. Yeah, the Kinenco, and I think one of the speakers mentioned about Kinenco needing to move at one point as well. Yes, 100%. The master plan redesign for the whole Wincheap industrial estate probably would mean the relocation of existing Kinenco depot. I've learned a lot over the last week or so about Wincheap and the area, and actually the bit where that isn't the area where Kinenco currently isn't the area where you would put housing, for all the reasons I think other people have pointed out as well, which is that it's the area that gets wet. So not particularly great for the housing. If you looked at Wincheap industrial estate, you'd be building housing towards the roadside, and you'd be pushing industrial units and parking and those sort of things towards the rear site. And actually, where Kinenco is probably isn't suitable, particularly for either of those endeavours in the long term. So the value of that site isn't going to be hugely impacted by residential, unfortunately, or fortunately. And the plan for Wincheap within the draft local plan is it would come later in the local plan cycle, because it's quite a complicated site. There's lots of complicated leases. It's a very complicated setup. It needs to be linked in with the traffic infrastructure works that would be done around there. And we would need to look at how you sort of master plan getting similar industrial and commercial units in there, whilst also bringing in about 1,000 houses, which it's allocated for. So it's a complicated site. We need a master plan, and realistically, we're looking at that coming forward to or being delivered towards the end of the local plan period. So the late 2030s, probably early 2040s. So not 2028, which is the issue for us at the moment. So we'd have to use capital which hasn't been released from the sale of Wincheap for development to bring forward money that we'd need to then do the Kinenco transfer and movement now. It's our site, Kinenco site, so we wouldn't cost anything for us to buy that for the park and ride. But obviously, if we didn't have anywhere, and you're right, Vauxhall Road is one of those areas we could look at, then we would potentially be looking at some form of capital purchase. And wherever we move to, it will require some form of capital infrastructure. And I know Councillor Dawkins is, sort of a big advocate of us promoting the idea of how we bring in electric or hydrogen vehicles later in the Kinenco contract. So you're sort of putting some of that infrastructure in now, as opposed to in the future when we've released hopefully a large capital receipt from the transformation of the Wincheap industrial estate. So it's a timing issue as much as anything, but as great as Nikki is, she can't smooth our capital and revenue finances over a 10 to 15 year period. If she could, she'd be in high demand. So we're sort of stuck in that place at the moment. And just to say, for when somebody brings up that, but we're going to be a unitary, so it's somebody else's problem, I'm sure somebody's got it on their list. Nikki also can't do that, and I'll say that first, so she doesn't have to. We can't pass our problems on to somebody else, because they also are problems and our residents in the future that would have to deal with that. So whilst there's a bit of smoothing that we can do to work through capital receipts, we can't smooth £2 million worth of revenue savings to a new authority. Not what you asked at, but I just wanted to make that clear for anybody in the future.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. I
certainly dancing on the pinhead. I agree with Councillor Brady on the dancing on the pinhead options. The speakers were very eloquent about the various reasons why A and B, and I think it was D and E, are probably not suitable for the local, from the local position and from the land usage of the recreation centre and from the benefits of the water meadows. Whether I completely or utterly agree with them on that is another matter, but they are eloquent on that. On the other two options, the multi-storey, one quick question: do we have to build it 5 stories high, 4 stories high? Is it a cheaper option to build 2 or 3 because it increases the spaces beyond the immediate need and the need of the next few years? So you have an allocation if you were able to build a floor, say 5 years hence, you could build one down and save the cost at the moment. So I think that's one on there. And on the Kanenko offer, just out of curiosity, I think that sounds like it would be a very flexible option in that if there was a new position in a future time, that because you're actually not disturbing the land too much with that option, that it would be possible to relocate it should an option come out towards Charlton, for example, or on the other side of Thannington in the future, that may be possible. So questions on both those two on that front. Thanks.
I'm not sure I understood the second one, but let's come back to that. The first one, definitely, yeah, you could leave off a deck, 2 decks, and only provide, say, 750 capacity on day one. The cost consultants, we asked the cost consultants to look at that, and they estimated you'll save about £1 million a deck. So 25 could come down to 23. But when you put it back on, you're probably 5 times that, because you still have, basically, the disruption, you still got to put, basically, the lift cores on in day one. You couldn't just leave a lift core out and then tag it on. So there's a lot of infrastructure you have to do up front, and then the cost of retrofitting would be hugely expensive. So it's not a cost-effective option. I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow what you were saying about relocating Kanenko later. Sorry.
It was that because they're essentially flat car parks that you're putting there, that should a future administration or ourselves want to move it somewhere else, and those options become available, for example, the garden centre on the way to Charlton, or whatever the bus movements there change, that is easy to do from that option.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Kanenko site, if you've ever been there, it's lots of industrial units. It's probably got a lot of asbestos. There's lots of contamination. We know that. So if we go with that option, we've got to clear that site and level it, and that would make it a much more usable, blank canvas for any other options in the future. So yes, we could.
Thank you. Councillor Mellish, please.
Thank you, Chair, but it's okay. Councillor Brady actually made a comment around option C. Obviously seems to be the preferred one, and his questions are similar to what I had, and I do note Peter's response to that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to jump in and out because I've got notes here and all over the place. So I can't really, I've not pre-written a speech yet. When it comes to retrofitting a car park, when we did the one at the train station, I do recall we wanted 2 stories on that one, and I originally think the bill was 6 million, and we was told if we wanted another story, it was impossible to do. So that's hence when it went from 6 million to 9 million. They're the figures that I recall. Okay, so you've got to go for it or not bother. So that's an answer to that. When it comes to park and ride, whenever I drive around the country on my holidays, Colchester springs to mind as an example. They used to have a park and ride basically near the town, and you'd park in there, and it's quite small. But now if you go along the A2, Colchester, there's a massive park and ride all the way along the A2. You come off the A2, you jump on a bus, you go into Colchester. So what I'm basically coming round to is you've got to create a destination to park and then get people into your town. The other way round doesn't always work. So what I'm trying to say is basically I'm trying to not miss stuff out. When it comes to the cost of the actual multi-storey car park, whether you rob Peter to pay Paul and all that nonsense, if you have 900 parking spaces, if they're full up every day, that's 4,500 you get a day, okay? Working on those figures, it's 234,000 a year. That's full up from day one, right? And bearing in mind, wherever the money comes from is technically taxpayers' money, because if it's come from here, you're not paying for something else, like Councillor Naomi Smith said, something else has got to give. And working on those figures, it would actually take us 106 years to pay that bill back. That's without any interest on top of that. So I've said this before, and I'm a broken record. When it comes to the Wincheap Park and Ride, it literally takes 6 minutes to drive from the Wincheap Park and Ride to the old Dover Road Park and Ride. And as Councillor Dean was saying, there's no signage. If there was signage, possibly, I don't know if there is or not, if there was signage on the A2 from Faversham, maybe people wouldn't turn off to go to Canterbury and go use the Wincheap. They'd go, oh, I didn't realise there was a Dover Road one. And same the other way. So the signage, if there isn't any signage, needs putting in there. So that's part of that. I'm a Herne Bay councillor and I support Herne Bay, and I'm through and through. So what Canterbury decides to do to that?
Start to wrap up.
I've got loads to say. So what I'm basically saying is the fee. Have we literally got 3 minutes to say? Because I've got quite a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Is it a question or is it just a general?
Well, okay. I'll come back to the main point. If you redirect people into, and this is supposed to be a listing mode, and so the Wincheap off slip, fine, that will happen. But actually, if you direct our residents and do away with Wincheap altogether, or make it a smaller one, and one of the speakers did mention this, we could actually direct people to the Dover Road Park and Ride, which is easier to get to without the on-slip, and actually that would make more sense. I don't feel in this meeting I've had an appropriate time to actually put my point across, so I do feel like my hands are tied. I'm not that impressed with this meeting. We should be allowed 3 minutes in planning. We're allowed to say, and I've got lots to say and suggestions, and I do feel as if you're not allowing me to say it. Thank you, Chair.
I'm not stopping you from speaking. I'll bring other people in though, and then bring you back if that's okay. There was a few points there anyway for Richard to respond to. So I'll leave him to do that.
The key point is you were saying is why do we need to provide it at Wincheap? Why can't we direct people from the London direction around the sort of city, 2 miles around the city? The reason for that is the Wincheap currently just serves the A28 from Ashford. The Wincheap Park and Ride serves the A28 from Ashford direction. That's what it currently serves. As soon as the A2 off slip goes in, you will not have capacity for even that demand. As soon as you provide the off slip, there's nothing to stop people from London wanting to come off there. You could sign them direct. You could say car park full. A few of them might go on to New Dover Road. At the moment, it's a very convoluted route. You have to come off a bridge and go around the loop and then back on. Park and Ride, to make Park and Ride work, and it's not easy because you've got to get people out of their cars and onto a bus, it has to be convenient. There's no point in putting a Park and Ride that's not convenient for people. You're just wasting your money. So the site at Wincheap serves both those corridors really nicely. That's what the previous administrations for the last 20 years have said. If we've got the off-slip in, let's meet that demand in one location. Now, some of these options are looking at 2 locations. but they work in transport terms. But trying to direct people from London to go another 2 or 3 miles around the city to get out of their car, to get on a bus, to get back on the city is just not going to be convenient, and it won't stack up as a credible solution.
Briefly, please.
It's 6 minutes from Wincheap to there. If you stop them coming off at Wincheap, and only in one direction, and you make that the direction or destination, sorry, then that's what will happen. That's fine. That's fine.
You can't stop them coming off. You can't stop them coming off. They will. The off slip will be there, and it will be a really convenient people. Some people come off at Harwell down now and drive into the city.
Yeah.
But once you've built that off slip, straight into a site that needs to be there for the Ashford direction, people from London will choose to use it.
But
and
that's
then,
the whole
and then
point.
you haven't got a solution for the A28 traffic.
Okay.
Just a sec. Just a sec. Okay, thank you. I think it's worth being clear. We are talking about the Wincheap options here. There's a number of options about Wincheap, but we're not talking about New Dover Road. Oh, well, I'm looking at what's in the paper, and we're being asked to consider those options, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Come in, Councillor Naomi Smith.
Okay, I've got a little bit confused about the Kanenko site, and about the costs of the Kanenko site, how much it's going to cost. Because it says in the paper it's sort of roughly 10 million and then maybe 5 and 3. Is that the cost? Because, and to just reiterate about what Councillor Buckman said about, well, the cars won't change. We have more houses being built. There is 4,600 being built at Brenley Corner and Swale Council. And some of those people will want to come to Canterbury. You know, there is going to be a demand for stuff that's out with our control, let alone the stuff that we're building. I mean, I do note in the thing that it says that people from Whitstable might use the Wincheap Park and Ride. Currently, people from Whitstable don't have a park and ride that they can use. They just moan at me about how much Pound Lane costs. So I just want to understand what the costs are for if the Kanenko site is the preferred option, please.
Is that Richard
So
or Nicky?
The construction cost, and this is remediation of contamination and demolition, is estimated at 6.5 million. Because it's a hybrid option, we've still got to reconfigure the existing site once the A2 offslip. That's estimated at 3.5 million. So that's where the 10 million comes from. Then obviously the relocation costs subject to sites and whichever site is chosen.
But the relocation costs are going to happen anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, so it sort of goes back to something I said earlier around at some point, Kanenko would probably have to leave that site as part of the Wincheap master planning, but the likelihood of Wincheap coming on stream is probably towards the latter end of the 2030s, not the early part, because it's a complicated site, not least because of the makeup of the commercial units and leases and the reconfiguration and stuff that would be needed to be done there to make it into a full site that could deliver 1,000 homes and commercial units and probably semi-industrial units, and all of the complications of the floodplain and bits and pieces that would need to be taken into account when redesigning that whole area, not just the bit that Kanenko's in. At that point, once it's sold and it's needed to be vacated for whatever the uses are going to be, Kanenko would move. At that point, assuming we sold the whole of Wincheap to a developer, which probably wouldn't, but just assume for now you would be in receipt of a nice capital receipt that would more than cover anything to do with moving Kanenko anywhere in the district, probably anywhere in the country, with hopefully the money we would get from that, but probably somewhere in the district. as it is, we've got to move Kanenko without any capital receipt for Windcheap. We're not selling the land to Park and Ride because that's just selling the land back to ourselves. We already own it. But Kanenko's going to have to move somewhere. And if we can't find land that we own that's going to be large enough, and it's quite a sizable site, it would need to be slightly larger and slightly more reconfigured to deal with some of the additional infrastructure we'd be looking to put in, and also trying to bring some of the additional resources that Kanenko got dispersed across the district back together for efficiency reasons. It would be a slightly, that would be a relatively large site. We're looking, and that's why it's between 5 and 8 million. That probably could stretch more as well. That could go upwards of 8 million, but we've gone in with conservative, hopeful 5 to 8 million for the sort of size site and capital spend that would need to be done to create a waste depot to take on all of the stuff that's needed. We could also not do that. We could just go bare bones and say, well, we won't put any of the future infrastructure in. We'll do sort of what Windcheap is, which is a temporary allocation, and then wait it out and see what happens in the future. That would probably come in on the slightly lower end, but wouldn't give you all the opportunities. A bit like multi-storage, you're going to have to stick a deck on in future. You're going to have to stick some infrastructure in the future. So it's that sort of chicken and egg thing in terms of how you deal with it. So hopefully somewhere in that sort of bracket, we'd be able to deliver it. The big issue is trying to find somewhere suitable to put a waste depot that's well connected. Ideally is within the district, or at least well accessible to get onto the main routes, and also within the tipping sites, so links over in Hurston and some of those sort of areas, in order to be able to make sure it functions properly without us having to also then spend additional revenue on additional trucks to operate, to be able to deal with it being dispersed too far across the district. So it's complicated, and to be fair, for officers, we've only had a few weeks to try and look at this. The idea of using Kanenko is a relatively new option that we've explored, which is why it's relatively looser on some of the financials. But for tonight, in terms of transport, it's a viable option.
Sorry, I was going to come back because I have got a concern then, because we could end up going, yeah, this is the option, but then end up with a massive bill that gives us the same problem as having the multi-storey, is that we're going to lose stuff across the district. So it is a difficult, because there is an awful lot of what ifs, and maybe a decision needs to be deferred until more work is done on that. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's, I am quite concerned about the Kanenko option in that way.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, but we are working extremely hard on that. We are looking everywhere. We are talking to everybody. There will be somewhere. It's just how much, and that's why we're sort of trying to work through. We've got probably 3 or 4 places, not exact, but areas that we're looking at which probably are viable. But they would need to be looked at. I'm sure they're going to throw up similar issues as we're getting tonight in terms of where they may or may not be located. So some of this could also be down to planning consents and issues when we get through to that. So we can try and find somewhere, and we will. There will be some options somewhere. It may not be the best, but it will be achievable. The burning platform for this is on the 5th of March. This committee is going to be looking at the final draft of the local plan, and on the 16th, I think, of March, Cabinet will be, I think, taking a decision on which of these options it's preferred to put into the final draft of the local plan. So we're on a relatively tight timescale to be able to sort of come up with every single piece of detail. And there's, what do we say, 6 options in here. We're also now having to do sustainability assessments and reassessments and environmental assessments of all these options. So the one that you do go for, one which Cabinet do go for, we're ready to be able to drop into the local plan and make it a legal document for there as well. So it's challenging timetable, but we need to hit those March deadlines for the local plan. Otherwise, as we all know, the consequences, and I think Councillor Brady sort of mentioned that, consequences of not having a local plan are as stark as doing something on one of these sites tonight.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Firstly, just in response to the point that Councillor Naomi Smith raised, whatever option we eventually select, we're going to have approximately 1 year of feasibility studies and detailed design. We're not locked in to a huge amount of money that we can't reverse out of. So if we adopt the Kanenko option and some hidden costs come out of the woodwork that we didn't know about, we can reverse our way out of that. I don't think we're locked into spending the money from that cabinet decision. What I was going to say was I was expecting to come along tonight as a ward councillor for the area and give an impassioned speech in support of what's been said, but I don't think I really need to do that. We had some very good speakers from the public who've put the points across, and what I'm hearing from the overview committee is that they generally are getting behind that. And I've not heard any appetite at all for any of the options that build on the River Valley, either on Thannington Recreation Ground or on the Water Meadows. And I'm just wondering, Chair, you started the meeting by saying that one of the outcomes of tonight was that we wouldn't be putting a recommendation forward to Cabinet. But I'm just thinking, we have, if you like, slayed those dragons somewhat tonight. Is it possible that we can think about putting a recommendation towards the Cabinet? Because I think what I wouldn't want is for us to go through this yet again. You know, those dragons have been slayed. They've resurrected themselves. We've had to fight them again. I don't think we're tired. We don't want to do that for the third time, fourth time.
As I said, if the committee wants to put forward a recommendation, the procedure is just the usual one. If there's a proposer and a seconder, so the proposal would be to have a formal vote on a particular. Is that just a question, Councillor Brady, or just you're seconding that idea? Yeah, that motion. So if I think it comes with pitfalls, Peter, as we've heard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if what the committee wants to do is give a steer to Cabinet of its preferred choice, it's not the only choice. It's not the only choice Cabinet can make, but based on what you've discussed and what you've heard, the general feeling you picked up from speakers and through going through the papers, if you feel there is a preferred option, not the only option that could be put on the table, but you would want Cabinet to understand that and understand what's been said tonight, you can probably find a way of wording that that would be sensible. And as you're saying it, keep your eyes on me, and if I start doing that, that's probably a sign to just let's rethink it as we go through. But everything you've been saying so far is probably not even predisposed in some of this stuff. This is just, you've got a strong opinion based on what you've seen and where things are going. So frame it around that. I know at least two or three of you already look like you're ready.
Sorry, I should put the mic on. I've got other people on the list who still would like to speak. Councillor Brady and then Councillor Auld. Did you want to make a point about what Peter's just said or what Councillor Campbell's just said?
Yeah, it would be wording of a recommendation, but if Councillor Auld wants to come in and ask questions because he hasn't spoken yet, then...
Councillor Auld, did you want to speak?
Thanks to Councillor Brady. I just wanted to point out that the role of this committee, as we've set it out, is to act as a community champion by enabling councillors to raise matters of general concern. Now, if we're not going to vote for a preferred option because of the reasons that Peter's given us, could we at least express our view that there is no enthusiasm for building on the water meadows or on the recreation ground, and just record that as our preferred position? Thank you.
Equally, I think that probably works as a way of recording your collective view. I might have to just take 2 minutes just to discuss how we would word it, if that's okay. And I'm aware there's people who still want to speak. Councillor Mellish.
Sorry to be a pain. Thank you, Chair. Just that Peter's response to the query about Caneco has totally confused me. In terms that it's obviously evident that the way this committee is going and the options that it wants to, given all the options, this is perhaps the more preferable one. But the timetable doesn't fit according to what Peter says. That we are looking to start commencing on this around about 2030, and the site at Caneco won't be ready until 3840. Because of then the finances go behind that, etc. Find another site. I'm confused. There tends to be what in those 6-8 years when we start between starting site work on the Wincheap site and then the Caneco site. What happens? Unless we're expecting the Slip Road and the Wincheap site to take that time, that the Caneco site then becomes a viability.
I'm going to ask Peter to come back.
Does that make sense? Yeah, in terms of that timescales and the finances.
Probably my apologies, Councillor Mellish. I probably haven't explained it exactly or as clear as I could have. So I think what Councillor Smith was saying was, how do you were going to move the site anyway, Caneco, as part of what the policy already in the draft local plan is, and that's correct. But we would have expected that to happen in about 10 or so years' time. In order to deliver the option C, I think on here, we'd have to have that done and started around 2028. So that's 10 years earlier. So that's why there's additional money in here, because we'd have to access money earlier to do that movement and redevelopment now, rather than wait until when we sell the site or we do something on the site, which would release it for residential and mixed commercial and light industrial. So we're having to forward pay that rather than wait for a capital receipt that would offset that in the future. Does that make more sense?
Thank you, Chair. That kind of clarifies it. I was getting very confused there in terms of you saying there was a delay. We couldn't do anything until then. That's what it sounded like.
I've got other people who are still on the list, so can I bring in people who haven't spoken yet? I've got Councillor Jones who wants to speak next. The list keeps getting longer, so everyone's going to have to be a little bit patient. Councillor Jones, and then I do want to see if Councillor Thomas wants to come back in as well.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you to all the speakers this evening. I think if our Cabinet, some members here tonight, wanted a steer from the public and the members tonight, I think they've heard of some really good speakers tonight, and they've got a pretty solid steer on what the public think on specifically certain areas within these 6 options. Thank you for the predetermined advice. I probably could have definitely said some other differently, but it's clear, I think, that a particular option, if you like, is coming to the front with these. We're on a timetable regarding, unfortunately, the local plans tumbling along, and you just feel a little bit pushed into the scenario of making a decision where maybe some of us may not feel that you've had that long run up to it to actually get your head around it. The thing I was just going to ask Richard really was regarding the on-slip coming on, and we are making the assumption, which is from obviously a non-engineering person's point of view, but are we making the assumption that all the traffic, what's going to filter on there? Don't forget, obviously, Wincheap, we know, is notoriously congested. I mean, it's a real. I mean, if you were driving the other way to go to the park and ride, you're just not going to do that if you know the area, if you know what I'm saying. So, are we making the assumption with the numbers we're making that all of the traffic is going to find its way into the park and ride, because a significant amount of that traffic could try and just filter itself straight into the city centre? I mean, I don't know how you would split that, because that's a concern. Just going back, the reason for that concern is obviously if you had the, I don't know how you would stop people from doing that, sorry, which would be a really, could be potentially a big issue. But not to be afraid of considering how we would manage to use the new Dover Road site when things get expanded, when we've got more housing being built. We shouldn't be, I understand the modelling is going to be in one site, that was the plan, but you actually think of the worst roads around that one site is Windsheep. We all know that. We live around here. People know it. So just looking 5 or 6 minutes up the road, depending on the direction you come from, I accept your argument that people, once you open that slip road, that's the first one they're going to come to. Of course it is. We do it when you go to places when you're on holiday. It's the first one you see, generally you go to. But there must be a way of how we would manage to use Dover Road in a better way to help that issue, because Windsheep, as we all know, is, I mean, it hasn't got enough traffic lights for a start, has it, Windsheep? But we need to be really clear about that, and obviously listening to the views of people today, absolutely, building on, green land and that kind of thing is a difficult thing. But just interesting what you think about that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and you're right. The speaker who left actually made the point that it's not the first one you come off. Harbour Down is the first one you come off, and of course there isn't a park and ride that serves that junction. So if there was one, if we could build one at Vernon Holmes School, Faulkner's Lane, Hall Place, then actually that would be the first one they would come off at, and they would use that one. So this would be the first one. It's not, it doesn't take you past the city. I think that's the key. Psychologically, you go up to the city, and then you're sort of a midpoint where you would catch the bus into the city. It won't capture everyone who comes off there. Won't be using the park and ride. Some will still probably want to drive into the city centre. We hope, through our pricing strategy and our supply, that we encourage people to use the out-of-city parking. People could use the New Dover Road now. There's no off-sleep, so people could do that detour. You say it's 6 minutes. We've done surveys up at New Dover Road. Very, very few people do it. Now, you might say this, it's not well signed, but I think everyone knows the New Dover Road, where it is. It's just not going to be an attractive first destination. And so it won't meet the need in transport terms, and it won't be a credible strategy that stands up at a local plan examination.
I've got Councillor Butcher next.
Yeah. Tom asked the question because I wanted clarity about Canico site. So it's answered. Thank you.
Councillor Watkins was next, I think.
Yes, thanks for letting me speak again. Sort of slightly related to previous questions, but new points. I mean, we've talked a lot about the sort of environmental damage of these options. I think we just really need to put on the record that there's a real economic loss to any of these options. I mean, we are talking about a park and ride multi-storey which generates no net revenue. No net revenue. That means, so if it costs £25 million, we get nothing back. The residents are paying £25 million of taxpayer money, and they get a car park. It's not a public library, or an art gallery, or a sports provision. And we're obviously moving a bit towards option C. I get that, right? And I probably have a similar view. But that's still £18 million, and it also creates a dead weight economic loss, which basically means, the way economics works, all the residents of this district are poorer. Now, I just think, I actually feel a bit sorry for Richard here. This is all upon his shoulders. If we went for C, £18 million of public money, essentially on your shoulders, Richard. You've done all this analysis of park and ride. Some of what you said I agree with. Some of it I'm a bit nervous about, because if it's 5 minutes longer to drive from Ashford to, say, Old Dover Park and Ride, New Dover Park and Ride, would that be an option? I mean, if you're in Ashford, wouldn't you get the train? It's just so much better anyway. And from London, it makes next to no difference going one extra junction in the total time. And if you had good signage, as everyone said, you could probably divert some of the flows there. It just strikes me, couldn't we be a bit more creative and look at how £18 million of public money could be spent to suppress the demand for the park and ride by what is only a few hundred spaces? No one's talking about closing down Windsheep Park and Ride. That's fine, leave it as it is. And I would imagine if from the bus first strategy, you could take some things in there and accelerate them and suppress those extra needs for park and ride spots, and it could be from the train as well, right? Anything sustainable does the same job. It could be walking, cycling, busing or training, does the same job of removing sustainably those marginal, say, 300 park and ride spots. So I suppose what I'm saying is that we're moving towards something to do with number C, but I still feel this is just so costly in so many ways. Can we not advise Cabinet to just take one more look so that it's just not down to Richard with his, transport models and take another view on this? Thank you.
Thank you. I think most people who wanted to speak, and I will offer Councillor Thomas if he wants to come back and raise any other points. So I know there were some other points he wanted to raise, and I did promise you could come back. Lots of speakers tonight, so thanks for bearing with us, everyone.
To be quite honest, I'm so angry, I don't think I want to speak at all. To be quite honest with you, if I didn't get a lift here tonight, I'd have gone.
Okay. Just picking up on the last point, I think one of the points that was mentioned earlier was about origin data. And if that could be looked at as a way of smoothing demand for park and ride, that might be something that's worth looking at, possibly, because if we've got other modes that...
So we know where people come from that use park and rides at the moment. We know where people come from that use our city centre car parks at the moment. The strategy is to stop people using city centre car parks unless they absolutely have to or want to pay high sums of money. That's the strategy at the moment. There are any number of strategies. We could discard the park and ride strategy now. If you wanted to, Cabinet could do that. It would stop the local plan in its tracks. The existing site won't meet the current demand for the A28. Once the A2 off-slip goes in, you're down to 390 spaces. So you're not meeting obviously approximate average demand now. In a couple of years' time, that will not meet the current demand. You've got to do something for that, or you change the strategy. You could do that.
Councillor Brady.
Thanks. I think Cabinet will be hearing loud and clear these arguments and be deliberating them. I'm going to take a stab in the dark at a proposal, if I may. After hearing the compelling arguments from public speakers and residents, this committee would like to propose to Cabinet that they recognise residents' preferences in option C as the preferred option, and protecting the Water Meadows and Thannington Rec are clear reasons for this preference.
Do we have a seconder for that? Is that Councillor Dan Smith? Are you seconding that? Okay. Councillor Brady, can you email Pippa with your wording just so it's in the minutes and it's nice and accurate? And read it again just for clarity. I'll give you a minute to do that because yeah, if you read it again and then send it to Pippa, then it's in the minutes then.
Okay, and I will send it to Pippa. So after hearing the compelling arguments from public speakers and residents, this committee would like to propose to Cabinet that they recognise residents' preferences in option C as the preferred option, and protecting the Water Meadows and Thannington Rec are clear reasons for this preference.
Peter, do you want to speak?
If that's okay, Chair. I think that's broadly okay. The only bit would just be clarifying Water Meadows as the Wincheap Meadows. I think the Wincheap Meadows is the area in those options. I think Water Meadows probably leaves it a bit broad for your option C proposal.
Yeah, so I take that amendment, Wincheap Meadows instead of Water Meadows, and I will email it across now.
Councillor Dan Smith, are you happy to still second it with that change? Yeah, great. So I will move to the vote, or Pippa will set the vote up.
And that's agreed, Chair. 8 for, 1 against and 4 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation in this part. Oh, it did record as an abstention. Okay.
We can't retake them.
We can't retake that vote. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to give a few minutes because we've got another item, which is on the housing strategy, and people have been waiting very patiently to present on that. But also, members of the public, you're very welcome to stay for the item on the housing strategy. But if you wish to leave, then I'm going to give everyone a few minutes just for everyone to leave the room if you wish to. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. So we move to number 7 on the agenda, which is the draft housing strategy for 2026 to 2030 adoption. There are no public speakers, and we're considering the report. Marie Royal, Director of People, and Tracy Chambers, Head of Housing Strategy. Head of Housing and Community, I beg your pardon. And we've got Gary Peskett, who's the Housing Strategy Manager, who is here to make the introduction to the report. Over to you, Gary.
Good evening, councillors. We're seeking the views of Overview Committee on the draft housing strategy 2026 to 2030. So the housing strategy is being refreshed because the previous strategy expired 2 years ago. So the draft housing strategy considers all tenures, but the key drivers at the moment for refreshing the housing strategy are the major changes we've had in the wider policy environment regarding housing, such as AWAB's law regarding the issues of damp and mould, the Renters Reform Act, pending legislation about decarbonisation of the council's homes, and the revised Decent Homes Standard. We also need to improve the way we manage our council homes following the inspection by the Regulator of Social Housing. The housing strategy considers housing affordability in the district. It carries out an assessment of the housing need for affordable housing, addressing local housing needs by increasing the numbers of affordable homes, particularly new council homes, and aims to support the draft local plan. So although the housing strategy is no longer a statutory requirement, it is still the key strategic document that underpins all other housing-related strategies and policies that the council puts together. The homelessness and rough sleeping strategy element has been separated from the housing strategy. So this enables both documents to better fulfil their core functions. And it enables the homelessness and rough sleeping strategy to better meet the expectations of the Homelessness Reduction Act. On the 19th of January, Cabinet gave permission to consult on the draft strategy. So the consultation is running from the 21st of January to the 15th of April. The Residents' Engagement Panel will be fully consulted and briefed on it, and their views will be sought. Over 300 members of stakeholder groups, registered providers, and developers have been invited to give their views. And by last Friday, 32 responses have been received. So be happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. So just to say that feedback is being sought on the draft strategy as part of the wider consultation process. And this committee's comments will be considered by Cabinet alongside the wider consultation results when making its decision on the final housing strategy. So I'll open the debate. Any comments from anyone? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. First of all, I think it's a really good strategy, so thank you. But I've got a couple of questions of clarity, really, and it's perhaps more about my lack of knowledge than anything. Under section 5.5, talks about increasing the number of council homes, and I do recognise the council's efforts have been undermined by our right to buy, which has led to a net loss of council houses in stock. And then there's some bullet points saying what the guiding principles are for the council's new programme of delivering council houses. But I'm not seeing any actions in there that are material that will lead to a material increase in council homes that will offset the number of right to buy in the immediate plan years. And it might be because I'm reading the document wrong, and I'm not trying to be particularly clever on that. I'm just trying to look for clarity on that, please.
Gary.
Thank you, Councillor. The last few years have been quite challenging with the right to buy, and this year in particular. has been probably even more challenging than most. The government made an announcement last year about proposed changes to discounts for the right to buy. And what that has done is it's meant we've seen a surge in applications. So this year already, I think as of the start of this week, we've already had to sell 43 homes. So that's a lot more than normal. I'm working with colleagues in property and regeneration and planning, so colleagues across the council, to basically assess the sites that the council already has and owns, such as garage sites and those sort of things, which Overview Committee have heard about in the past as well. And we're also looking, where possible, to try and maximise the number of homes that we can buy by purchasing Section 106 properties and also seeing if we can do deals with developers. So it's got to be a multi-stranded approach. And basically, we're working that up now. So the document that you see before you now is very much a working document, and I'm listening to what people are saying. There will be firming up of detail within that to try and make sure that it reflects the practicalities of delivery.
Could I just come back? So this is a sort of draft that will be amended to reflect the work you've just said, is that what you're saying? And can I just get a rough idea? Are you saying that we'll be showing a net positive in the foreseeable future, do you think?
Well, let's just say that that's the aspirational target that officers have been given. Obviously, we'll strive to achieve that. Canterbury City Council wants to leave the new authority with a position that is better than we've got now. So that is what we're aiming for.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Just a couple of things. I'll ask a silly question. On the front page where it says there's a statutory requirement for the local housing authority to produce a homelessness strategy, which is absolutely fine, but not for a housing strategy. Just for me, from that one point for the minute, why would that be specifically? Because I think they're just as both important.
I would probably agree with you, Councillor. The housing strategy used to be a statutory requirement back in the day, and the government decided to change the priorities. And partly that reflects, I suspect, the fact that homelessness has come up the political agenda quite a lot more. So in practical terms, although it's not a statutory requirement, everything that's in this document, you know, it's supporting the local plan, it's supporting the allocations policy, it's supporting the HRA business plan. It's really the golden thread that links everything together. And I agree with you that it would probably make more sense for it to be one of the statutory requirements, but it no longer is.
Thank you for that. Just one other question, if I can, Joe, was on your point about the right to buy. Obviously, it's been more difficult. You say last year, I think you said 43 homes had to be disposed of and whatever. It's obviously clear that moving forward, or even before moving forward, that particular strategy nationally is run its course, and to help local authorities for housing, which not just here, obviously, but across the country, really. My view is that it's had its time a long time ago, and it should go. And hopefully a government will do that at some point. That's just a point I wanted to make. But the document, I'm not usually on overview. It's excellent work, a lot of work. And so well done to your guys and the officers for doing that. And I hope you get a really good response and back in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo the comments of my fellow councillors about the report itself. It's been great. I found it shocking that 90% of households are unable to purchase a home. And I just want to understand, if you could help me, when we're talking about the housing needs assessment and the estimate that we need 695 new affordable homes per year, is that just to take account of demographic change, or is that going to do anything to alter that 90% figure?
Right, Overview Committee has this habit of asking me deceptively simple questions that end up having very complicated answers. To keep it as straightforward as possible, there's a very complex calculation behind that housing needs assessment. So it looks at the demographic growth, it tries to project that, it looks at the number of people on the council's housing needs register, it looks at the number of homelessness approaches that we've had, and it takes into account a huge number of factors. The evidence base, the Canterbury Housing Needs Assessment, is part of the evidence base for the draft local plan. And if you're short of something to do for a few minutes, if you look on there, it runs to several hundred pages, the housing needs assessment. That's not just the assessment, you know, the physical calculation, but it does give you an insight into the sort of things that are taken into account. It includes things like hidden households, household growth, all of that sort of thing. So it's trying to sort of like future-proof things. I think the trouble is really about delivering on those numbers, and it's easier said than done.
But just help me. Is it going to make a difference?
It's going to make a difference because it underpins the policies that go into the local plan. So that sets, as is clear from the strategy, by far and away the largest sector of housing is the private sector and its owner occupation. So a lot of the affordable housing that is produced comes through Section 106 agreements with developers and with builders. So in order to get that delivery, you've got to have robust policies in the local plan that are based on the evidence. So in order to justify, for example, 30% of new homes that are built on sites of over 10 properties, they have to be affordable housing. So it's hard and fast policies like that you have to have the evidence in the local plan to support that. And the role of the housing strategy is also to support, to actually interpret that evidence and to support the local plan so that it gets through examination.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. You might not be able to answer this question. This administration gave big fanfare, which is great, for building new council houses and stuff. If we've just lost 45, do we know where we are with that stock now?
Well, I haven't got today's stock number, councillor, simply because it's a moving picture. So everything is a snapshot in time. We know that at the 31st of March, we actually owned 5,130 properties. And, you know, it's a moving feast. We had been slightly improving our position for the last couple of years, because if you recall, we bought the 67 homes at the Woodlands. We'd also bought approximately 20 properties with government grant under the Local Authority Housing Fund. So over the last few years, we've had some very positive results. At the moment, we're buying for the General Fund another 20 homes for temporary accommodation for homeless families. So there's a lot of positive work. It's just unfortunate that sort of like the Right to Buy and the announcement of the changes, proposed changes to the discount levels have encouraged a surge of people who want to take advantage of the current discount levels because they're likely to be cut in the next year or two.
Thank you. Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on the private housing sector or the private sector stock, particularly around page 54. I wasn't clear whether this was the rented sector or whether it was actually owner occupiers. In terms, for instance, that 1,224 or 8% of dwellings in the private sector rented sector had category 1 HS, the health and safety standards. Or then you go to a highest concentration of fuel poverty in the private sector were found in the wards of Little Stour, Addisham, Northgate and Chartham. And similarly, you had similar figures, so those with the HHSSR hazards, the highest number in Reculver sort of areas. Again, obviously semi-rural places, but I'm unsure there isn't a division there, as it were, between what is the private sector, what is the rented sector, or what is the owner occupier. Therefore, the Renters' Rights Act won't affect maybe a large sector of that. So how do we influence, what I'm trying to get is, how do we influence those sorts, that sort of situation? How do we change that sort of poverty? Because winter fuel poverty is crucial. And I don't see necessarily in the paper as a way that we can answer that. Again, for looking at some of the people in Reculver, Charlton, maybe living in isolation as well. So
yes, from memory, somewhere in the text, it makes the point that that generally the situation is worse in the owner-occupied sector than it is in the private rented sector. Partly because the owner-occupied sector is so much larger. You're talking about 60-odd% of the total homes in the district compared to 20-odd% in the private rented sector. But also a lot of owner-occupiers are older people who are often asset-rich but cash poor. And although we are the Strategic Housing Authority, dealing with private sector housing is really a general fund duty. And I think it's very difficult to find effective levers to pull that will make a significant difference in that sort of thing. I mean, there are schemes around sort of like warmer homes and that sort of thing that have come forward from time to time. But it's very difficult trying to influence the owner-occupied sector, particularly when people are older. You know, one might say, well, we could encourage them to downsize or right-size, and it's a very difficult, time-intensive thing, and the societal benefits are there, but there's a lot of input for the council, and we basically haven't got the funding to do a lot of that.
Thank you, Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think Gary's pretty much just answered what I was going to say, apart from the fact that the I think the affordable homes figure is something that we really need to press the government to change, because 9.6 times the median annual earnings is the average house price in Canterbury. That 66,790 quid. You've got to be a higher rate taxpayer to buy a home in Canterbury. That's just ridiculous. And it's 80% of that is not affordable to almost anybody. No wonder it's 90% of a problem.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
I think increasingly younger people are going into shared ownership, which we have got quite a lot of going on in the district, and this is a part that I know it's mentioned in here. I wanted to pick up on the converting commercial premises. Because I've got 120 homes plonked in my area under permitted development. That's a massive lump of people. I mean, they're very nice people. They are very nice people. Yeah. They're very young. They're all young because they can buy a one-bed apartment for 160k. So, you know, it's so, you know, but they are young and they've got a gym on the premises. But it has made a big difference to the area because it was Make a Study Park, so it was offices. And because it was permitted development, it's all without our control, really. And I think that's something that we need to sort of try and pull back on the government with, because I don't know if we've got any other areas where you've got these edge of town office blocks like Make a Study Park, but it's something that we might need to sort of look at.
Yes, because it's permitted development. We, as a local authority, we just don't have a say. And we used to have the policy of trying to dissuade development so that there wasn't a loss of employment space. But I mean, these days it's very difficult, and you know there's no way of influencing it. Yes, yeah. So. It is, yes, yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I don't think there's any further comments on that, but lots of really good points, and it is a really great draft strategy. Thank you very much for all the work that's gone into that, and I think it really deserves a good airing when it's consulted on. Thanks for points about right to buy as well. I mean, these are really crucial points to our to be considering. Does it come back here? Did you ask? Yeah. Does it come back, or does it just go up to cabinet and then they make the decision, or what's the next steps?
The next step is that it goes to cabinet, and given the timetable, it's likely to be in June.
Okay, that's great. So all the comments being taken into account. Yeah, we've had a good discussion on that. A shorter discussion, but a good discussion. As it's now 9:25, it's been a long night. Thank you everyone for your patience. Thanks for bearing with us tonight. The next meeting is at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 5th of March. There's no other urgent business to be dealt with in public, and we don't need to exclude the press or the public. Meeting closed, 9:25. Thanks very much.